Hello, everybody. This is Robin Robinson here again, and this is the Complete Whiskey Course video edition. And today we are going to talk about distillation. Distillation in regards to whiskey only. As a matter of fact, type of distillation we're going to be talking about is one of two types. One type of distillation is done in something called a column still or a coffee still. We're going to be talking about that at another time. It's a little bit more complex. We're going to focus our attention on something called the pot still, and this goes back thousands and thousands of years. So essentially, as you guessed, rightly so, it starts with a pot, right? So now the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians would dig things out of the ground. They would maybe combine a couple different things. They would put them in a pot. They would maybe put some liquid in there and essentially just allow evaporation to sort of separate things inside of there. Then after a while, and we're talking a long while, they would have the sun actually bake on that, and that would accelerate the evaporation. And then after a while, they started putting a fire underneath that. And as you can probably imagine, they're separating the things that are inside of the pot. Now, it took about 1,000 years for someone to realize, hey, what if we take that pot and we put another pot on top of it, so that we can capture all the stuff that's coming out of that. And this is essentially what we refer to as our modern pot still today, right? So it's made up of two parts, essentially. The bottom part in the ancient world was called the cucurbit, and the top part in the ancient world was called the alembic. Today, the entire operation is actually called the alembic or the modern pot still. So what does that mean? Well, all of the things that are now being evaporated heavily or boiled out of there, right? Boiled out of there is being captured in this top alembic. But get this, it took even a couple hundred more years. And you'll love this part. It took a couple hundred more years for someone to figure out, hey, what if we put a pipe? What if we put a pipe on top of that top pot so that all of the steam that comes out of there can come out of that pipe and we can collect that? So that would drip out of there. You know, the Latin for distillation, actually the root of distillation is the word Latin word distillare, which means to drip. So they're dripping that out of there. And then it took a couple more hundred years for someone to figure out, how about if we bathe that in really cold water and that hot vapor is going to come out of there in a rush instead of a drip. And that's pretty much what we've got today. Now, the interesting thing is, distillation wasn't really meant for drinking alcohol as we make it today. It was for a bunch of other types of scientific and you know, they were making everything from perfumes to ointments to tinctures and things like that. No one really thought about ingesting anything that was in here. That didn't happen until what they put into the pot was another type of already fermented alcohol. In the early years, and we're talking now maybe the 11th century, 12th century, they started putting wine in there. And once you put wine in there, you already have a fermented beverage that has alcohol. It wasn't for a couple hundred years later until they got the idea to put beer in there. So, beer goes into the pot. Now, why does beer go into the pot? Well, beer is made up of grains. And if we're going to define whiskey in any way, it is a mash of grains that is fermented in order to get some alcohol and then distilled. Now, every country in the world actually defines whiskey in that way, and it's only grains. So what kind of grains? Well, you can use almost any type, but you're looking for grains that actually have a lot of sugar inside of the grains. So here is a little bit of barley. That's very popular, right? And here is some corn, and that's quite popular as well. And here is some rye, which is gaining some popularity. You can also use wheat, and those seem to be the four major grains that the rest of the world has actually sort of like decided they actually have the most whiskey, the most sugar, and therefore can actually make the most whiskey. So we poured the beer into the pot. We have another pot on top of it. We have this pipe, which is called the line arm. right? And we actually set a fire underneath. And so what's going on in there? Well, then we start a boil in there, but we start a boil just in order to separate that alcohol. And that's about 100 and, I don't know, depends, 175 degrees. Now, we all know that water boils off at 212. So the whole idea of distillation is to get that boil going so that what's going on is it's stripping off that alcohol vapor and it's collecting on the inside of this alembic. Now, the heavier vapors are going to fall back down into the pot, and the lighter vapors are going to come up, and heavier vapors back down, and lighter vapors come up. Now, this entire process has the same name of something that actually happens to you. Like, late at night, let's say 4 o'clock in the morning, and you had that pizza and beer at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you shouldn't have had it. And what you're getting is essentially reflux. And that's exactly what's going on inside of here. It's gases coming up, heavier things falling down. The lighter gases finally get to the very top of this, and they start their way down the line arm. The line arm is typically bathed in very, very cold water, and that turns all of that drip into something much more delicious, and that is actually our first parts of whiskey. Now, in Scotland, if you do this and you make Scotch whiskey, you're going to have to do that a minimum of 2 times, because the first time through there is not going to raise that alcohol up enough in order to strip away some of the really awful congeners. Now, who had those awful congeners? Was the moonshiners. They had 1 time through. Here comes the revenue agents. We're getting the hell out of here. There's moonshine, right? 2 times through. In Ireland, maybe in some cases 3 times through. The more you distill, the more you purify. The more you purify, the sweeter and the lighter and the fruitier the whiskey becomes. That is distillation 101. Hope you enjoyed it. Stop back again next time. We're going to talk about column still distillation as well.